Hey, everybody, welcome back to the China Doll Podcast. I am your co host, Michael D. Tidwell, and we are joined by a very incredible special guest. He is a recovery coach named Hugo V from lifeiswonderful.love. And Hugo, we definitely appreciate you jumping on board with us so we can get to know a little bit more about you and your services.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I like coming on, just talking about recovery, just talking about life, on how people can just live their best life.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely love having you on board. And, we definitely want to learn a little bit more about you. So, guys, just a brief overview of how me and Hugo met. We were at a podcast event here in the local area of Houston, Texas. And, we came across a lot of other people's podcasts. And our host, Anna, including myself, had a brief introduction with Hugo, and which we, felt very inspired by his message. And we really loved what he was all about. And so we wanted to bring him in on the show and learn a little bit more about him. So Hugo, I definitely thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Excellent.
Yeah. So Hugo, getting started here, I really just want to, know the man behind the message. A recovery coach in some aspects can somewhat be a little bit self-explanatory, but I really want to learn a little bit more about, who you are and, what kind of started this whole journey for you.
Well, as it is I'm a compulsive gambler and alcoholic. So, I've been battled addictions, for about 20 years, and I've been in recovery for over 25 years. So I've seen like most of my life, either been in addiction or been in recovery. So I've either experienced it or have, seen a lot. And that's just how things kind of started about 3 years ago. So, I just started like a lot of people, I got into gambling and drinking at a very young age. And it was one of those things, I still, went through high school, went through college, had a business, and everything, was still, there's those things that they call, like a functioning addict. And, you could still produce, but there was always a piece inside where, felt lonely, that where also felt like, I need to be getting more out of life. And a lot of us, for most people, they can't quite put their finger on it. What holds them back? For a lot of people, a lot of people may not go into like a deep addiction, but they may have anxiety, depression, things where they're not truly living in complete peace. Because ultimately, a lot of times we try to judge ourselves on material wealth or like who's our partner. And deep down inside, are we really at peace? Do we have that serenity? And that's why I kind of tell people, your EQ is your IQ.
Wow. Yeah, that's very impactful there. I do want to touch a little bit more on that. So, talking about this inner peace, I'm sure that it can be a struggle for a lot of different people, especially with what we see on a day-to-day basis with social media, stating that this is your ultimate happiness if you have these things, and these things. And it sometimes cannot. It can sometimes be a kind of more of like a destructive outlet, in which in most cases cannot be constructive. So it's more destructive. So, with social media being what it is today, I mean, do you find that to be like a helpful tool for people, or do you find that to be, kind of one of those things where, if you search for the wrong things, you're getting the wrong things, or, what's your opinion on that?
Well, first off, you got to understand that all addictions are emotional diseases. So no matter whether or not you're heavily involved in social media or you try to completely disconnect from social media is part of our life.
Mm.
You cannot have a business or be employed somewhere where someone is not have a podcast or someone's not on Instagram, Facebook, some
Right.
social media is out there. So I just tell people you cannot totally run away from it. It's like people like saying this is like, well, if you don't drink or gamble, I got to get to a point where I'm comfortable with it, where it doesn't trigger you or doesn't make you get a lot of insecurities, because alcohol is part of our society. Gambling now is being pushed so hard by all the major sports leagues, by all the state governments. So you're going to have to deal with, gambling, and the same thing with, other drugs. So it's really on how, like I said, I grew up in a family that never talked about emotions. So it's something that I learned when I turned 32, when I first walked into a therapist's office, because it was something that I was totally clueless. When someone asked me, how do you feel? It sounded like a trick question, because I had zero clue. Yeah, I knew anger. Yes, you had moments of anxiety as well as, some excitement, but it was so limited. And, our bodies are filled with hundreds of different emotions, but can you truly access and know what you're feeling every moment of the day? And we have multiple feelings at any one time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. Touching back on that, when did you understand that with the alcoholism and the gambling that it was starting to become a problem?
Oh, I knew early. I kind of knew probably that it was an issue back in college, but then you kind of get out of college, you're in your 20s, you're trying to figure out, a lot of different things about life. And so it's just part of life. And then I think slowly as my 20s started to get towards my 30, that it was becoming just so overwhelming. As so, as part of like everyday life. And then when I was 30s, when I stopped drinking. And so there's a 3-year period between where I wasn't drinking, but I was gambling more, because I still needed to escape. I still needed to numb out. I still needed something to almost survive each day or each week. And then so like a year and a half later, I went into therapy, and then a year and a half later is when I really was able to, stop gambling, and then really just focus on me and gain all that emotional intelligence. So I was about 33 is when I really started to work very hard on emotional work. A lot of people dismiss it, but it's no different than going to college, or if you're in some type of trade and you're trying to learn something, or you're trying to learn about money. You can't learn about emotions just by living. We all need teachers. We all need coaches. We all need to start either reading more or listening to other podcasts, or, trying to get more knowledge, because that's ultimately what holds us back.
And you feel that, with those resources, that one could definitely feel more of an impact in getting themselves better, turning their life around, so to speak.
Yeah, correct. And a lot of times you don't have, a lot of us, go to extremes before we actually deal with something. Like maybe there's a lot of people that say, well, I want to get healthier, but they never quite either address their own physical health until something major happens and they're in the hospital.
Sure.
And then they really start changing either what they eat or the lifestyle or this and that. But a lot of us, we may, you may not be like, let's say, completely over or underweight before you address an issue. If you're not at your peak performance, then ask yourself, okay, why am I not at my peak performance?
Wow.
And, kind of go from there. And the same thing with emotions. Just because, you have a job or you own a business or you're in a relationship, are you getting the most out of life? Is something holding you back? And a lot of times, a lot of people fear like, oh, I don't want to be years in therapy, or or they'll always justify, I'm not that bad of an addict. I don't need to do 12-step rooms, or I don't need to do this. I go, and that's that's perfectly okay. But what you may need to do is just like if you go to the gym, you may not be completely out of shape, but you may need a trainer for 3 months or 6 months. It doesn't mean that you're going to need a trainer for 3 years to get your body right. But you may need some coaching. Okay, what other exercises do I need? A lot of people are much easier to hire a trainer at a gym, especially at New Year's, because we're coming up on the New Year, than they are to hire a coach or go to a therapist to learn a little bit more about emotions, because we all deal with some type of loss or some type of struggle. And most people just, there is something there that there's a lot of people that just hold back. And I just tell people, look, the true 1% of the people, almost like the Dalai Lama, where they feel like you see them and they almost exude this inner peace, like total contentment.
Right. Do you feel, with all that's being talked about, do you feel that today a lot more people as of now are suppressing their emotions and suppressing their needs to want to find help?
I think it's always been there, but I think there's more and more addicts. And unfortunately, it's because so much is being pushed. There's almost like an oversupply. Like you can even see it either whether it's the drug cartels or the drug syndicates that are pushing a lot more, let's say, pills. So there's going to be a lot more these fentanyl pills, but there's also going to be a lot more meth and coke and marijuana. But there's also, even that's supposedly legal, how many more choices are there to drink alcohol? And now there's so many more choices on how to gamble. And there's going to be all types of ways if you want to escape into sex, whether it's going to a strip club or whether it's hiring someone or their porn. And then food. I mean, how much most of half the food probably in a supermarket is probably not best for us. There's probably a lot of poisons or toxins in that. And so we have to be really diligent on how we address. And there's just a lot more anxiety, whether it was COVID, now it's the economy, or where is everything going? So then there's going to be a lot more either health pressures or financial pressures, and that's only going to cause more anxiety. It's going to cause a lot more people to feel desperate. And when you're desperate, you tend to do things that are not best for you.
Sure. Post COVID, have you seen, would you say like kind of like an upswing in your services and, more people trying to reach out for help?
There is a lot more people that are reaching out in all different ways of help, whether it's in 12-step rooms, whether it's in hotlines. There seems to be spikes. The one thing that I try to urge people is you cannot fix everything in like 1 week. That doesn't mean you have to be a very long, extended time, but you have to give. I always tell people, give things that usually about 90 days. A lot of things can be accomplished in just 90 days. And if you really commit yourself, whether it's changing mainly your emotions, but in other aspects, if people really stayed committed, then they can see the change into the betterment of their life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've heard once before that, eating healthier, doing self-help and all these different things, even just a little bit every day can, definitely prolong your health and, just promote your overall well-being on a day-to-day basis. Would you agree with that? Would you agree that the small things that you can do, like eating right, exercising, really just the simple things, can benefit your overall well-being to where you're not, suppressed in these addictive habits?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it from a lot of different ways on how to heal. There's so many different ways. First and foremost, it begins with your brain. Unfortunately, there's a lot of studies out there that says we tell ourselves, or we're hearing about 80% of the stuff as negative. If we only started to really focus and feed our subconscious with much more like positive words of affirmation, like I deserve recovery. I deserve love. I have the energy today, to really work hard, exercise. And then of course you have all that, like you said, you have the natural stuff. You can feed your brain the right types of food. There is proven stuff, eat more blueberries, avocados, olive oil, those types of things actually feed your brain. So then you can actually focus better, work harder, and, and then just live better. But also, the exercise, those natural endorphins, that will give you that extra energy to do what you need to do. A lot of times, what you eat will make you sluggish. What you do can keep you, doing less. You got to get outside, get in front of that sun. The sunlight produces so much of those kind of like natural healing properties that we all need. So there's a lot of different things that people can do that are free, that are easy, that are already at our disposal. But if we're dealing with other types of stuff, or we're currently either overdoing it with some type of substance or behavior, just hire a coach, but make it, short term. Like I have a course, and I tell people I can work you through the 12 steps of recovery in 90 days. For most people, if they go into a 12-step room, it usually takes, because a lot of it is more self-study. It'll take you about 1.5 to 2 years. Well, if you already wasted a lot of time in an addiction, whether it's 10 to 20 years, why waste more time trying to get your life together when you don't have to solve all these things by yourself? And I tell people, why don't you invest in yourself and get something out of it? Just like anything, the more you invest, the more you're going to get out of it. And a lot of that is time, and some of that is going to be financial.
Gotcha. I mean, with, seeking that type of health, you would recommend kind of like a more shorter time frame rather than, kind of like a year and a half, more of a prolonged time?
Well, I think people tend to get more excited if they think it's going to be, a lot of things can be solved in like 90 days. The reason a lot of people, don't, let's say they don't get, some type of help, is because they think it's going to take too long. And people are going to get, like, if someone says, I want to have a really good body. I think people get overwhelmed quickly if they think, well, I got to work out 4 times a week for the next year.
Sure.
And you can have so many advances in the gym in 30 days. You can make so much advances in therapy in 30 days. But I tell people, usually 12 weeks, 90 days is a better barometer of your progress. And you'd be amazed as what you can do in 90 days. Because a lot of times people will, I think, overwhelm themselves by trying to do too much too quickly when they haven't been doing any of this stuff for the last 5 years, 10 years.
Right.
And they get discouraged. And I think people have to have a little patience, but also know that progress does happen relatively quickly. But you have to and that's what I said, that way you're not overly investing in time or money. If you just say, okay, 90 days, I'm going to give myself 90 days, 12 weeks, depends on the calendar, it might be 13 weeks.
Sure.
And in 12 to 13 weeks, you can really see, and then from then you make a decision on how you want to keep moving forward. Because maybe you don't need to start working out 4 times or 3 times a week. Maybe you just do 2 times a week. Maybe you have some types of pressures at work or your business, or it's seasonal. You got to invest more time, or something going on with the family and the kids. There's always going to be something pulling at us. But I say, it's a lot easier to make a commitment for 90 days than to say for the next year or 2 years.
Definitely makes sense. it also, I feel like, would put the mind a little bit more at ease. Like I think that's what you were saying, that, instead of it, being a year long, 2 years long, oh my gosh, that just sounds like it would take forever, just for that 2 to 3 month period. I mean, you can gain so much progress. And you don't feel as overwhelmed. And I could definitely see where a benefit can come from that, for sure.
Excellent. I agree. I mean, and that's how I always try to tell people is don't make a lot of big, everyone wants to be, I want to be a millionaire. I want to have this great love relationship. I want to have this great job. I go, no one gets promoted from frontline worker to CEO in 30 days.
True.
You have to, you kind of like work up the ladder. You work up different steps. The same thing with anything, whether it's building any type of financial resources or it's having a much more intimate relationship. And I always try to tell people, if you want to have you want to have better relationships, or I try to tell even guys, if guys want to have more sex, they have to be much more emotional. And a lot of times our society kind of tells us that somehow people have equated being more emotional is a sign of weakness.
Yep.
Being emotional, stating your feelings just means stating your feelings. If I tell you I feel joyful, does that mean that you're going to run away from me? No. That means you just kind of know. Now, if I also say, hey, I'm feeling depressed, that just means what I'm feeling today. Our feelings change dramatically, even with it throughout the day. But a lot of times people especially men, get really fearful, or they have a lot of this is just misinformation.
Sure.
They either hear it from other guys saying that, well, women are going to think I'm weak, and then they're either going to break up with me or they're not going to want to be around me. And that's the complete opposite. If you actually polled more women and you asked them, would you actually, and it's not about sex, it's about having a deeper connection with someone, having much more intimacy. A woman will say, I will feel much more secure in a relationship if I know what my guy is, or what my partner is feeling. And then in turn, when people feel safe, that's when they're willing to do more with you. Not only in the bedroom, but also just being around you, or maybe more comfortable with your family. There's so many other things. So I just tell people, if you want to have a deeper connection with your partner, then learn more about emotions.
Right. No, that was really impactful for me. Would you say that with, especially for the men that don't express their emotions might have experienced maybe trauma in their younger years, to where it, kind of projects that type of behavior for their future?
It could be trauma, or it just could be some type of emotional block. Maybe it's something, and a lot of times, trauma, people always think that trauma has to be something really big or huge. Like, were you abused?
Right.
Did you survive some type of horrific accidents?
Right.
Something. Did someone in your family member die, when you were, really young, whether it was a parent or a sibling? And sometimes it could be something major, like, your family, you were really connected where you were living and you moved away. That's a traumatic event for some people, that if they really felt like they were really living it up at school or with friends or with the community, and they had to then move to a different state, that's traumatic.
Yeah.
A lot of us, I was bullied as a child for my name. There's a lot of us that are bullied. Now, is it as big as like physical or sexual abuse? No, but it was traumatic to me because I started to hate my name. And it took me a while to really come to terms with everything. But, so trauma comes in a lot of different forms. A lot of times, or it could be like for a lot of people, maybe they were trying out for a sports team or some type of arts, let's say for some type of musical or some type of music group, and that they were cut. They were not picked. Now, a lot of people will say, well, that's part of life. You're not going to always win. But it's still traumatic to the person if they, let's say spend a year practicing and then they were pretty much told, no, you're no good. Now, for me, I could remember, one time at a company that I was fired. That was, I didn't even realize that I went depressed for 6 months, but it did affect me. I just thought, oh, it was just good timing. I was going to, it wasn't working out anyway, but no one likes to be rejected. And that's traumatic, anytime, or, we've all probably either rejected someone or we've also been rejected in love. Yeah. That can be traumatic, and that, that hits you hard
for sure.
And those are the types of things that, need to be kind of discussed. And like I said, is a lot of times men just have been taught that, just kind of like suck it up and deal with it. But there's a lot of different studies that say that's probably why men have a lower life expectancy, because they are not expressing themselves more.
Wow.
They hold that in. And, when you keep holding it in, time does not heal. A lot of people assume like, well, that happened a long time ago. Any type of emotional experience stays in our bodies until we actually bring it up, talk about it, process it, and deal with it. That's why a lot of times, why a lot of religions had confession. That's why, like therapy, they always say, well, talk therapy works. That's why they talk about in 12-step rooms. Well, if you did a step 4, a step 5, and you kind of like got some of the stuff out, that's what holds us back. All those, whether either resentments or that trauma, however you want, whatever word you want to put on it, it stays within us until we process it out. And, like I said, look, there's a lot of excellent therapists out there. There's also a lot of excellent coaches, mentors, people that have helped people kind of move along in their life, in their careers.
Yeah, I love that. It definitely speaks directly to me because, there's definitely some things that I could possibly improve on. And that really warms my heart to know that, you don't have to hold everything in, and, you don't have to, show yourself as weak, expressing your emotions. And it's very comforting to hear. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Well, it's definitely a strength. Being able to state how you feel. Because here's the reason why most people don't state how they feel is we have a much greater fear of rejection, and that feeling that we're going to be unloved. If I told you truly who I am and what I've experienced, what I'm feeling, I'm more afraid. I'd rather almost be in a toxic or bad relationship than to be told, I don't want you anymore. We tolerate, I don't know about you, but I've been in relationships. I stayed in relationships way too long, because I was thinking like, well, I don't know, everyone says, well, I don't want to start over. Well, do you truly want to be in a place where you feel unsupported? No one listens to you.
Right.
No one appreciates you.
Right.
You're better off. And that's the other thing is people don't realize what kills a lot more people is loneliness. But there's a difference. Feeling lonely or being alone. Now it's healthy to be alone at times. We all have to feel alone, in our thoughts and, just doing what we want to do.
Right.
And I always encourage you, besides traveling for work alone, travel for pleasure alone. Do something, for yourself alone, because there's no relationship. I don't care how connected you are with your partner, where they're 100% excited to do, everything with you, doing certain things. Sometimes they
Right.
feel like they're being dragged to something.
Right. Right.
Who wants to be anywhere where you have to drag someone? If you don't
Right.
want to come, don't come.
Right.
I'm
Right.
either
Right.
going by myself or I'm going to call someone else. And so I tell people, it's like, it's okay to state your feelings is actually a sign of strength, because we have to live more in faith than in fear.
Mm.
And when I talk about faith, is first of all, faith in ourselves and in faith in our ideas. That there's always, there's what, 8 billion people in this world.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone rejects you, it's not going to be that difficult to find a new friend or a new lover.
Sure.
It truly isn't, especially if you're working on yourself. If you're trying to make yourself better in different areas of your life, there is so many other people. Like, I had nobody, when I went into 12-step rooms, my family and friends did not support me.
Mm.
But I met a bunch of new strangers. I met a bunch of new friends.
Mm.
And no one, I hope that more people feel supported if they seek out help. But there's a lot of us that had zero help. But then we found new people.
Mm.
That's what I tell people. There's always someone out there willing to listen. Almost kind of like how we met.
Right.
You show up, you're doing something you like. I have a podcast. You have a podcast. Oh, we meet up in this group. And then you start meeting other podcasters. And most of our family and friends don't get why are you guys so interested in a podcast? Well,
Right.
Guess what? There is a bunch of people here in Houston, Texas, as well as worldwide,
Mm-hmm.
that have a podcast and try to, understand about it. And then you meet new people like we met.
That's right. That's right. Hugo, I definitely appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. This was very impactful, very inspiring. We only have just but a few minutes left. And, before we let you go, I was wanting to ask you, where can people find you? What is the best social media platform that people can reach out to you for, seeking for help, advice, anything such as that? Where can people find you at?
The best way is my website, lifeiswonderful.love. So it's www.lifeiswonderful, all one word, .love, LOVE. From there, you can tap into all my social media. I have a video library of over 46 free videos on emotional stuff, on recovery stuff. And it also taps into my podcasts or podcasts that I've been on. And then on top of that, if you want to connect with me, I have a course on how to work the 12 steps of recovery. And, if you want coaching, I have different coaching packages, whether it's one session to kind of feel me out, or you can do a package of, and that's why I say I have a package of 12, so there's different ways. So there's a lot of free stuff and there's paid stuff, but yeah, lifeiswonderful.love. You can see everything that I'm doing. And then also it'll connect you to my Instagram, TikTok pages as well. You can see whatever I'm posting and trying to get people excited about. Because I tell people 2 big things. I'll leave you with this, that recovery is beautiful. Mm. And whatever you're trying to recover, just always, almost like step into recovery instead of feeling like, oh, I have to do this because it's my only choice. You step into something, you're going to be much more excited, and you will then have more change. And like I said before, your EQ is your IQ. Always be aware of what you're feeling, because that will in turn tell you almost like how you're moving. So always keep in mind your EQ is your IQ.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hugo. We really do appreciate you being on board and telling us a little bit more about you, talking about mental health, talking about recovery, addiction. We're all about it. Guys, if you want to learn more about Hugo, you can definitely check out his website, all of his platforms. This episode is going to be featured on YouTube, and we definitely appreciate you having you on board, Hugo. And yeah, guys, that's the China Doll Podcast episode for today. You can follow us at the China Doll Podcast on all social media platforms. And thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate your time. Love y'all.